nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down. My brothers on the ground, I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me
Hello everybody, welcome to the Scottish Rugby Podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. I am Cammy Black. Joining me this evening we have John Anderson. Hello John.
Good evening, Cammy. Good evening.
And for the second week in a row, after a reasonable hiatus, we've got Rory Baldwin. Hello Rory.
Hi guys, how are you?
So we've got a packed pod tonight. We've got a historic Scotland win against Wales to talk about. We've got a little bit more on the update on Siobhan Cadigan, some breaking news that happened as we were recording the last podcast. We've got high tackle consultations happening from the SRU. It's all going on, and then we get to laugh at Welsh rugby for a little bit as well. So there's always that as well. If you are watching live at the moment, you will be watching us on YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. You can also listen to an audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, anywhere you can get podcasts. I'm not up to date on the I'm not up to date on all the podcast apps there are these days. There's Spotify and Apple Podcasts, I think, seem to be the miss. We've got a message from Harley Worthy, who's a regular listener and watcher of the live pod, who just says, on behalf of your Welsh listeners, please be gentle. It's been a hard week.
We'll try.
Yes, we'll see how that goes, Harley. On behalf of Scottish rugby fans who've had to put up with Welsh rugby fans' crap for the best part of a decade and a half, we'll see how that goes. We've got the podcast tonight. Then we'll dive later on into our Patreon special version of the podcast, where we'll talk a little bit more probably about the Wales game and some other things as well. First things first, and again, we don't want to be here. We don't want to be talking about this. We want to spend a whole podcast talking about the Wales game. However, as we were recording the podcast last week, as myself, Johnny, and then we had Nick's on, and then Rory joined us for a little bit as well. We were talking about a couple of things. Was the SRU's continued failure to properly respond to Siobhan Cadigan's death. And on top of that, we also had the Tell Us email inbox that the SRU had launched for people to report sexism, misogyny, racism, homophobia in rugby. Now, John, I wasn't at the game at the weekend, but Johnny and Craig were. They're not with us tonight, but they were, and they report quite furiously from the game that Siobhan Cadigan's photo had been put up at halftime while everybody was at the bar. The stadium was half empty with a couple of other, I think, kind of female rugby players who'd passed away. It's beggars belief that the SRU just continue to carry on getting this utterly wrong.
Yeah, it's staggering, isn't it? And we've obviously joked in the past about the SRU's ineptitude and like tone deaf way that they seem to approach most conversations in a very, very kind of corporate tone deaf way. This is a really easy one to get right. Now, given all the wrong they've done, they could fix this. They could fix this, and they continue to. It's almost like, yeah, it's like that. It's like that classic thing of apologising, but you don't really mean it, and that's how it comes across. It's kind of those small token things that they're trying to do, and obviously you're going to talk about the note from the family, the statement from the family, and the sort of things that have come out of that as well. It's staggering. Like how can a professional, a professional corporate entity behave in this way? It beggars belief.
Yeah, it is staggering, Roy. And like I said, the statement that came out from the family as we were recording the podcast, I think it was Johnny who said it's probably just as well that neither of us noticed it was up there. And I got a message from Nix afterwards saying she was really pleased she didn't read it at the time, because I think we may have been apoplectic, but we've had a week to kind of reflect on it. And I think that there's a couple of main points that the family raised. One is that the SRU, this is the meeting that the SRU finally had with the family and their local MSP that had been cancelled. We should just reiterate, it has been cancelled twice at short notice by the SRU, including once with the excuse of we're organising the Six Nations, which demonstrably they are not. Mark Dodson is not involved, does not hold tackle bags as far as we know. They have stated that the SRU have stated to the family that should they further on a Siobhan, they'd have to do it for the same for everybody else. Which, no, I think it's that as the family said, no other international player has died on the SRU's watch. Most of the other former players who've passed away, it's been after it's been in retirement, right? It's been much later in life, or like Doddy, with motor neuron disease. Similarly, as the family have also pointed out, the tribute that the team did play was on a match that was streamed on, I think, on YouTube, on overseas match on YouTube, and the stream only started when the game kicked off, so there was no kind of wider tribute. It was just a laying of a shirt on the pitch, which even then there's there were, I think the team were unhappy with how it goes. So I think the SRU come across as very exasperated by all this, as opposed to trying to understand and get ahead of things. And every single step, they just seem to kind of dig themselves deeper into the hole.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you ask Mark Dodson if he wanted to hold tackle bags, if it got him out of kind of confronting this issue, you probably would. I mean, the thing that was interesting about the halftime at the Wales game is that was actually like a tribute to the players from Scotland's women's team that played Ireland in 1993, which was the kind of first women's rugby international, and that Scotland played in, I think. So it was kind of a celebration, but it was kind of, it's like, let's lump all the women's stuff that we want to deal with in. We'll parcel it up at halftime and we'll put it out. But I mean, the article I saw about it, because one of the women was from Inverness originally, in the local paper, that came out on like the Friday. There was very little warning that even that was happening. So the ladies didn't get much of a tribute because nobody knew what was going on, why they were on the pitch, who they were, because it wasn't announced clearly enough on the PA, by the accounts of the people that were there. And it just again, Siobhan is kind of seeming like an afterthought in with that, and it's like it. Yeah, as you say, they sort of dig themselves into bigger holes, but it kind of doesn't go away, and the problem now is how do you? It's almost like anything they do to deal with it is not going to seem right because they've waited so much time. So sticking a photo up when there's a tribute on to some other things, that's not going to seem like enough. When letting the even if they announced it sort of properly and clearly and let the women play the women from the team on Saturday there pay tribute. I don't know if whether any of them would have wanted to take that on or not, but that that if they had, that would have been quite a nice gesture, I think. But yeah, it's just the fact that the longer they go on not dealing with it, the bigger their response kind of has to be, but the less likely they are to want to do that, because I guess to them it'll seem like an admission or whatever, and they've got all the kind of talk of legal actions and stuff that they're trying to almost uses as kind of cover for not really dealing with it. But I think most kind of fans, obviously it's never going to satisfy the family because of what they've gone through, but most of the fans who are interested, they want a chance to pay tribute properly, which is obviously what the kind of eighth minute ovation stuff's been about. And if they give them that, I'm not saying it's going to take the heat off the SRU, but it will a bit.
The thing is as well, though,
I think
they've admitted themselves. Sorry, Cammy. They've admitted themselves by saying, by almost addressing and saying we think we've done enough in that letter. All they're doing now is, as you rightly say, nothing is enough now, and it's like all they're doing is it's attack, and they're basically saying anything we do now we're being forced to do, because we think we've done enough, and it's you guys that are the problem. It's your fault, and that's a horrible mentality to be in.
Yeah, and I think the difficulty with it is that now what they're saying is to find, well, what do you want us to do? And that again, it feels very half-hearted. It's like, well, we've had enough of putting up with this. Just tell us what you want, and hopefully it'll go away. And the family have been very clear what they want. What they want is an independent inquiry into what's happened from genuinely somebody independent of the SRU coming in and looking what's happened, and to pay a genuine tribute to Siobhan. The family have been very clear about that from the start. So it must feel very insulting for the SRU to come and say, well, you tell us what to do, when they've been very clear all along what they're after. And that's the only way I can see the SRU now getting ahead of it is they would have to offer a genuine apology for getting it wrong so far, to explain the reason why they've done that, accept responsibility for the fact that that's on them, and for them to offer a tribute as a result, and to make that public, that we've got it wrong. This is the first time and admit this is genuinely one of the first times the SRU will have had to deal with something of this magnitude. So it would be fine for them to say we've got it wrong. We didn't get this right. We're committed to a full independent review of what's happened. We're going to bring people in from outside. We're going to involve the family. We're going to publish all the findings, and we're now going to pay, and we will pay proper tribute to Siobhan ahead of the Ireland match by laying having the family present the match ball, having the players wearing an armband, something that's the only way they can get ahead of it. But to continue to kind of mess around the edges in the hope that it'll eventually go away, it's not going to go away, is it, John? Because the next thing we're all waiting for is, the next question is, well, what's the outcome of the internal inquiry? And then the question is, well, now we want that. Then that needs to be independently reviewed, and what's going to happen as a result of that? It's not going away unless they do something big.
Yeah. I mean, even if they do something big, it's not going away. The scenario, the way it's transpired, the way it's played out, the way it's had to play out because of that veil of secrecy from the SRU and the Times article, the message from the family. As soon as that hit the public sphere, this was never going away, and this should never go away. This is, there should be lessons learned in they should be always learning from this now, and they have to have this at the forefront of what they're doing at all times. And and from a media management perspective, it's been, this is the sort of thing, like, no joking, this is the sort of thing they'll teach in business school in future about media management and getting ahead of stories and stuff like that. It's been an absolute catalogue of errors. Just minus base humanity. And it's little wonder that fans are so angry about this. Like, people are angry, and that's why it's not going away.
Yeah. And then on top of this, Rory, there's we talked last week about the Tell Us campaign that the SRU launched. And as I said at the time, I think that it's clearly something that's been worked on behind the scenes, that's been rolled out or rushed out to try and deal with some of the kind of the wider stories about misogyny and sexist behaviour in Scottish rugby at club level. And we've now got the SRU on the back page of the Scottish Daily Mail with a whistleblowing charity saying that it's not good enough because it's not it's not a way to safely anonymously report things that have happened. That it's Heather Dewar who hopefully we're going to get on a future podcast, but the players that she's spoken to, the women she's spoken to involved in Scottish rugby, said, well, we're not going to use it because it's not anonymous. And Scottish rugby is such a small world that it's very clear that if you whistleblow or report something, who you are, and it's no good the SRU saying, well, nobody's told us. And they've got women saying, but we have told you, we've told you through the channels and nobody's done anything. So it does, all of this kind of swirling around does lead to big questions around attitude towards women and women's rugby and Scottish rugby. And they're not going to go away, Rory. This is, this shouldn't be back page news during the one of Scotland's best opening Six Nations.
Yeah. It's exactly. It's the last thing that Scottish rugby needs at the time when on the pitch the men's team are doing well. But that's it's not something that can be buried or ignored. I think that there's obviously a kind of big issue, especially with the stuff we saw around Liberton ladies, and there's it's kind of if they doubt that the culture, the prevailing kind of rugby culture in Scotland or in clubs is going to take them seriously, then why would they report anonymously or otherwise? And if it's not anonymous, then certainly not, because they're going to know that eventually it comes back. It's like it's like a sort of, I'm not saying it's a corrupt system, but it's like the systems of corruption in the in the Cold War spy movies. You tell someone, but eventually somebody who is in the wrong place in your chain of trust is gonna it's gonna leak, and then you'll end up in the gulag. And I think for the it needs to be something, again, almost perhaps independent, that in terms of who's handling the kind of responses, so that they can be dealt with safely and anonymously.
I think the interesting thing for me, John, as well, was I was reading up about the celebration of the women's first international side that was set up in 1993. So 30 years? God, I'm old. The first women's international in 1993, which in itself is an utter disgrace. It took 1993 till we had the first Scottish international.
Wow.
However,
yes.
I hadn't really appreciated that the women at the time had formed a separate union. It was the Scottish Women's Rugby Union, which I think had affiliations with the SRU. It was its own kind of separate identity, but that they merged in 2009. And when we've talked on certainly when we were doing we were looking at the kind of Scotland's hardest players in the past, you and I, John, we've kind of said, well, it's strange that Scottish women did really well throughout the 90s, and they kind of did all right through the early 2000s. We were saying on the phone, I remember us talking about Donna Kennedy, for example, saying it was really weird how things fell away from like 2010 onwards.
Around that time.
And then I was reading today going, oh, that's why they got brought under the umbrella with the SRU, and the SRU has run women's rugby into the ground until they've been forced to do something just because of the sheer determination of women in Scottish rugby to make things happen. But that's that's the thing. That is, as much as the SRU now will say we're doing great things now, fine, what they're doing now is absolutely fine. It's as good as the IRFU and the WRU are doing, but that neglect up to that point has completely been on everybody's watch who's in charge now.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. They're now at a position where they're doing things to almost get back to where they were in terms of the women's game. And it's a very interesting read. If people listening haven't actually read into the sort of history of the Scottish women's game, it's a very interesting read. And again, it's stories that are told across. Like, Scotland's not unique in this sense. Let's be honest. These stories are told across women's rugby across the world, with very few exceptions. The difference is the reaction to that swell of women are playing rugby. We need women's teams. We need contracts.
Is that him?
Is that John that's gone on me? I wasn't sure it was me. I was waiting for John to catch up.
Yeah,
John
no,
was
I can see
That's
your
good.
reactions in real time, and he's frozen. So I'm guessing.
Well, that's fine. I thought, oh, this is me. I'm just going to sit there. I'm just going to sit through this. John looks absolutely furious. To be fair,
You've got to style it
that's
out.
fine.
But
yeah, that's it. I was just sitting here thinking, I'm just going to pretend I'm listening, and then my video will click back in, and it'll look like that's been seamless.
Yeah. I can see your eyebrows moving.
That was good. Good. I'm pleased you said something, Rory, because I was going to sit there in silence and just thinking, that's my internet. That's not John's. It'll match it.
Boring show as we sat there.
The interesting thing, one of the interesting things, of course, Rory, is that, I mean, even looking wider, that I think the first Women's Rugby World Cup it was 1991. The women who organised it had to mortgage their own houses to make that work.
Really?
Whereas, that it's beggars belief that would ever happen in men's rugby. Although I can't remember, Budge Pountney was once billed for the cost of a tie, I think, that he gave to a child in the stand by the SRU.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. But it's still just, I don't know, it just feels, I mean, watching the Thistles in the last few games, and this is the, I get development side is probably the right way to put it. It's the side that the SRU have put together in lieu of a pro side to play against an Irish and a Welsh equivalent. And so it's the players there are some Prem 15 players who are playing, some university players. So it's a good mix. So those that aren't currently being selected by the Prem 15s team are being made available. It's a way to warm up for the upcoming Six Nations. But I've watched the last few games and the highlights of them, and I watched the highlights of the most recent one, and for me, the standard, certainly in defense, has gone up massively. Right? I don't know. It's just the. I mean, effort's the wrong word, but I think we've talked on the podcast previously about the women's team kind of felt like they were a little bit kind of that pre-Vern Cotter Scotland of, we'll score some nice tries now and again, but our defense is just a little bit lacking. But for the games I've watched more, the last couple of games with the Thistles, the defense is much more organized. It's much faster. There's much more desire to get back up the floor. Everyone seems to know their role, and I don't think that wasn't always the case with the national side. Admittedly, because they just don't have the same prep time and the same investment as the men's team, so it's not necessarily a criticism of them. But certainly that last game against the WRU, the defense for me, Rory, was very good, and it's encouraging to see kind of that's the next step I think that women's rugby needs to take at a professional level in Scotland.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the same as with kind of all developing players. It's time spent in a group with consistency of coaching, and I mean that's something we've kind of seen with the under-20s and the women's teams, is a kind of quite a regular shuffling of the coaching group. If they can get some consistency, I think that helps them. And yeah, I mean, it was watching the highlights. They scored some nice tries. The standard seems quite even as well. I thought obviously the Thistles kind of came away on the scoreboard, but I think if the three teams in that kind of mini competition are of a level, then that's probably going to be more instructive than sometimes in the Six Nations when you've seen them, on the end, when in previous years anyway, when we've seen them on the end of kind of big scores, which hopefully is not going to be such an issue now that we're seeing these new moves towards professionalism and having centrally contracted players, and there was the appointment this week of Martin Hagg as the forwards coach as well, who's former England under-20s head coach, and they're obviously pretty good at developing the millions and millions of players that they have. So hopefully he'll have a positive impact as well on that.
Yeah, and I think just, things are going to hand now and moves are coming off. and there really were some absolutely lovely tries. I can see John Anderson's. He's in our lobby. Oh, he's back. Hello, John. I'm just saying.
Trying here.
Let's see how we get on, John. But there is. It feels like the Thistles have taken a step up, and that, as Rory said, the time together has paid dividends. One in defence, but also in attack. Balls going to hand. It's coming out the base of the ruck much quicker. Everyone seems to know what their role is in the team, and when eventually we'll add into that the Rona Lloyds and I think Rachel Malcolm's played a couple of games to this. When you add in the players that aren't there to that, then it goes to show that how good Scottish women's rugby could be if that investment had come much sooner.
I think it was the end-to-end try for me that showed everything that this team are all about. The maturity, the lines, the support play, all these things that, as you say, with time and investment become second nature to players. You didn't see the panic. You didn't see the, I've broken the line, so I'm just going to take contact. There was a real quality about what they did in that try in particular. I thought the attacking play was magnificent. So good. That maul where they've taken Wales like literally miles back and smashed them. Brilliant stuff. It just shows even just the small amount of investment that's taken place so far is starting to have an impact, starting to make a difference in a shocking turn of events. Who would have guessed it?
Who knew? And then the RFU today have announced full pre and postnatal care for its women rugby players. So basically, they're going to pay them a salary and look after them and pay for their medical care. And now we're waiting for the over to you, SRU, because what a fantastic step to take, Rory, in women's sport, to say, and we've seen a lot of women athletes talking about this, saying it shouldn't have to be the case that they wait until their career's over, which has been the tradition, because it's always been seen that that we've certainly, I think, in British cycling, for example, and other elite sports where coaches have been exposed for holding views like, oh, you're just going to go and get pregnant, or and unfair views that, well, the moment you've got kids, your performance is going to drop. So to see that step from the RFU to kind of commit to say, look, if you go and have a child, it won't affect your career at all, which it should absolutely. It sounds daft talking about this, but that absolutely should be unarguably the case. But it hasn't always been in sport, so that has to be the next step for the SRU, Rory, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, they've started. I guess they've kind of only just established them as employees or contracted players. So it'll maybe take them a while. I mean, when did England announce the tackle thing a couple of weeks ago, and they announced the maternity cover today? So a couple of weeks, we'll give the SRU to do it.
Just the SRU to
midweek
kind of copy what
between France and Ireland. I'm sure there'll be a press release.
Copy what the RFU are doing.
Yeah, just 2 weeks behind. But I mean, to be fair,
2 weeks, 10 years.
With the pro game, we're about 10 years behind. So, that would represent considerable progress.
It's in, I did want just while we're on that, because you mentioned the tackle law there, and we will come back. We're going to keep coming back to the women's game throughout the Six Nations. But on that tackle height thing, the SRU tweet about it, John, almost threw some quite serious shade at the RFU, because they're properly consulting on it and being very public about the fact we're consulting on the tackle law height, rather than what the RFU did was said, right, yous are all tackling below the waist, get on with it. And then everyone through fit. JB from the Egg Chasers podcast quit rugby and took up netball overnight.
And maybe that was the intention all along. Maybe that's what they were playing for. Who knows? You're absolutely right. Like, it is funny when you still get those moments where media teams and the person on the Twitter feed goes a wee bit rogue and maybe just puts in a wee nod to say, yes, we are consulting, we are asking our people, which is what you didn't do. But let's be honest, getting it right one time doesn't necessarily, mean the SRU are good at consulting with people. Can we? I think that's fair to say.
We've established that elsewhere, that just because the SRU are consulting on something doesn't always mean that they end up in the right place, as we've seen with transgender players in rugby.
Correct. Yes.
Rory, though, I mean, this tackle around the waist thing, I think it was Josh Gardner from the Blood and Mud podcast on Twitter made a really good point, that when we say waist, we don't mean where we wear our trousers, we mean where our grandfathers wore their trousers. And I think there's been a lot missed in that. The waist, where we now see the waist in 2023, or even where I saw my waist in the 90s, God, that was somewhere below my arse. It's not where traditionally the waist is somewhere in between your belly button and your nipple.
Yeah, so everyone think of Cary Grant before you make a tackle.
Yeah, that's it. But that's not then, that's even for someone that's tall hitting someone that's small, that's still achievable. And we saw a little bit in the Wales game, I guess, at the weekend, that aside from the George Turner one, which I think everyone would agree, George Turner threw his hands up straight away. He knew what happened, but there was a couple of, there was the Jack Dempsey moment of madness, but generally the tackles were all fine. There wasn't that, apart from the one high hit and the Jack Dempsey incident, the tackles were all going below armpit level at the very least. It can be done, and it's not a bad idea to do it if the long-term impact, if the long-term gain is to save the game as we know it.
Yeah, it's almost like Scotland are doing that already. As you say, there haven't been too many tackles. Like in previous years, every time a big hit went in, we thought, oh no, we're not going to get another player yellow carded, are we? And there's, aside from the Turner one, which was instant and obvious, and you thought, okay, well, there haven't been too many of the Six Nations. They do seem to be almost kind of tackling lower, whether there's something in the technique that means it kind of lays the ball carrier down for someone to get over it and jackal, or whether they're just trying to be safe. It doesn't seem to have done us any harm so far.
Shall we? That brings us nicely on to the Wales game. So I'll just want a trigger warning, because I know we do have listeners in Wales. We're not going to be gracious in defeat. We've put up with your crap for far too long. So
especially you, Dan.
This is not now. What I would say, I'll be very clear. I love all our Welsh listeners. Hello to Harley Worthy, who's watching live. Hello to Phil Lewis, who's one of our lovely Patreons and a friend of the podcast. But look, we're going to have some fun now. Please take everything we say with a pinch of salt. But I'm not going to sugarcoat anything I'm going to say now. We're going to talk about the Scotland Wales game from the point of view of being Scotland fans, and we're going to enjoy doing it. That's the trigger warning. If you want to switch off, we understand. On that though, and on the tackling, what struck me, John, is really interesting watching the game back and even watching it live, was where Scotland gave away their penalties and where they were competing for the ball and trying to hold up the tackler, for example, and where they were picking their moments going for the jackal. It was so smart, and it's not something we've seen from Scotland before. The penalties were all, I think they gave away one kickable penalty the whole game.
Yeah, it's almost like
a stretch. I think it was a stretch. There was the one where Wales went to the corner, I think, once with a penalty, and there was one that Bigger tried to kick and he missed, but that was from quite near halfway. Yeah,
it was about a 40 metre kick, right? Yeah, in front of the post. You would expect Bigger to make that, but you're absolutely right. It's almost like having coaches who are smart at coaching breakdown, coaching contact area. Pete Horne has come into that role for a couple of weeks and seems to have, basically Scotland in that sense looked a bit like the Glasgow team we've been praising this year in terms of their smarts around the breakdown, ability to compete at the right times, give away penalties in the right areas. It looked really positive. And, it's been an Achilles heel for Scotland for so long that we always seem to... The thing for me at the weekend, we didn't double down on penalties. We gave away the odd penalty here. Xander was giving away the odd one in the scrum, which rightly or wrongly you could argue the merits of that, but we didn't seem to back it up with, how many times have you seen Scotland go from a scrum 5 on the opposition, concede a penalty scrum, kick to the corner, kick to the touchline, concede the maul penalty for something daft like jumping across or playing the arm, concede another penalty corner, and then concede the try from the maul. We didn't do that, and that even against let's be honest, frankly, awful Welsh team, we didn't give them a chance to get in the game because we avoided that. The one time they scored was us doing that silly thing of conceding penalties. That was all they had.
It is interesting. We're looking at the lineup though in the Scotland team that, aside from maybe Richie Gray and Grant Gilchrist at a push, Finn possibly. Most of I think you look across that squad, and this is a squad that maybe don't have that monkey on their back of, we're going to go out here and we're going to concede loads of stupid penalties. We're going to try and slow the ball down because we're going to get desperate. We're not going to win this. This is this Scotland, the mentality of the Scotland team. And you saw, I think it was Johnny that pointed out on his rewatch that Jamie Ritchie's massive grin at the end of the anthems. They knew what was happening. They knew what was coming in that game. And they went out with, not with the false confidence the Scottish teams have gone out with before, but a genuine kind of like, we know what we're doing. We know what our jobs are. We're going to be in this for 80 minutes of this game, and we're probably going to win. Yeah,
I mean, it's the one kind of big noticeable difference. I mean, we still saw in the first half, them throwing passes to bits of grass and running up the old blind alley and stuff, things that Scotland teams have been guilty of in the past. But the one thing that is new, I think, is the mental approach and the confidence, whether that's down to our new mental skills coach or whether it's just they've finally started actually learning the lessons rather than just talking about it post-match. They just seem comfortable with whatever gets thrown at them. Now, admittedly, they haven't faced the two big teams yet. Ireland may be able to throw something at them that they haven't quite figured out how to deal with yet, but they've been quite comfortable with what's come at them so far. They've just they regroup. If they do go down a score, they just regroup and they get back on with it. But it seems like they're all kind of singing from the same team sheet. They're all they're quite they're confident in themselves, and it's a difference between saying that they are and actually kind of being, because we've been saying it for years, which is why guys like Dan Biggar come out and have a pop at it, because we win one game and yes, here we go, boys, Grand Slam, World Cup, we're going to win it all, because these players are so good. But it's the players themselves of it's the consistency. But whether we've now sort of got, I think we've got a kind of consistency on the pitch in terms of how we're kind of closing games out and things like that. So can we have the week-to-week consistency, I guess, is the next thing. After a 2-week break, can we go over to France and put in some sort of performance over there?
I think the key thing for me, John, the difference between the two teams, and it happened with about 10 minutes of each other. There was two incidents. There was the one where it was the Rio Dyer poor pass to Dan Biggar, although you could argue that Dan Biggar just didn't run onto the ball as he should have done. But his reaction to Rio Dyer was to scream and shout at him. Yeah. Now, I think it was about 10 minutes later in the game, and Duhan picked up an awful ball and had to basically run it back over our own try line. And everybody's there slapping him on the back saying, well done, great D, let's get up, let's go back. Yeah, don't worry about the scrum. It's no bother at all. And that mind shift, because you could see, that's Sean Lamont in the backfield. He's screaming at a winger. Do you know, you think of Scotland players of old, that screaming would not have been, but that kind of pat on the back, don't worry about it. Even if we concede a try from here, we know we're going to get back into this game. It's fine. That's a massive mind shift for Scotland.
They seemed relaxed. They seem relaxed with each other. They seem calm. Like they know what they've got. They know they've got the ability to score from anywhere. they're backing themselves in terms of their defence. You know, again, you're seeing Scotland are not playing with possession at the moment. They're not dominating possession. They're strike running. Like we know Scotland teams, the most exciting Scotland teams, the times Scotland have been successful, it's built on that basis, that strike runner. We don't play with the ball. We back our defence to put people down. We back our breakdown, and then we play off loose ball, and we do that so well. And it's Scottish rugby DNA really, and we're doing that just now so well. But the guys themselves, they seem to enjoy being around each other. I know we've obviously talked in the past on here about the social media nonsense and, you know, the laughing and joking coming out of camp and all the ha 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 sort of stuff. It does feel like a different camp to the autumn. It feels already like just in that short space of time, there has been a shift. Yes, there's been a personnel shift. There's different coaches in, and you can't obviously downplay the impact of that. I think that could be massive, but the players that were there just seem a bit happier with each other and seem a bit happier to be there, and we're benefiting from that. In that you are seeing that cohesion, that ability just to go, do you know what? It's fine. We are going to make mistakes. It's almost like the Scotland team is Finn Russell's career in a nutshell of let's make mistakes, but let's make something blooming marvellous happen too. I know, I see. That's quite funny that Harley's just posted pretty much the same on the comments.
Yeah, so Harley says the whole team seems to be taking a page out of Finn's book and playing like it's just a game. Really looking forward to seeing up against France and Ireland. There is a lot in that, I think, Rory, and I think I went, watching the last two games back in particular, going back to that New Zealand game where we were 2 tries down within the space of 10 minutes. But then to come back into that game in the way that Scotland did and to run the All Blacks close after being 2 tries down, again, that's from a Scotland point of view. Anybody, we were all watching that game going, here we go. 2 tries down in 10 minutes. This is going to be a long 80 minutes.
Yeah,
but,
you're all
but they
thinking,
turned around.
The sort of game from 5 years earlier when they ran them close, you think, oh, that's going to be a distant memory now, isn't it? And then suddenly they were, they were okay, and they were building a lead. I mean, they'll probably, they'll be kicking themselves that they didn't win that one. But I think everyone else was kind of so surprised that they actually managed to get into that dominant, kind of half hour against the All Blacks that we kind of forgave them for it. But you can certainly see, I think, since Aaron Walsh took over in the Fiji game in the autumn, it's that that I think the attitude just seems to have changed. These, I don't know, turned a key or something. And I mean, even Townsend seemed, in his interviews and stuff, he seems kind of laid back and like he's not worrying about the world. And I mean, for a man who's staring down the barrel of it, doesn't know what he's doing at the end of the year, he might be out of a job and he doesn't know what he's doing. That's one reason, I guess, to be relaxed, because he just doesn't give a damn. But I don't get that sense. It's more like he's like, right, well, I think we've sort of figured some stuff out, and we know how we want to play. We're all agreed on playing that way, and we've got the players to do it. So we're going to kind of give it a crack, and there's no sort of reason for drama. So, why be serious about it?
And again, we talked about the defence earlier for the Thistles game, John, but the Scotland defence, I think we're a couple of seasons in now with Steve Tandy, but you watch them in the 22 and you think we're going to get a turnover here. They're going to cough up possession. And it's not the same level of anxiety as one would once have. It's still there at the back of the mind. You still get kind of, so it's like Pete, I don't want to diminish post-traumatic stress disorder, but there's an element of that, of watching it and just kind of having the flashbacks to Scotland of old going, here we go again. But even as a fan, you can start to feel more confident going, they're just going to soak it up for a bit. And they're quite happy. And I think they look happy soaking it up as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got the players to do that. And it is telling, the personnel out there are all very, very comfortable defending. And it's when you've got that back line, and to a lesser extent, some of the loose forwards as well, that are so physical in defence, so able to cause havoc. running up the 12 channel and getting hit by 2 pull-out. No, thank you. No, thank you. Don't fancy that. But then you're doing that, and then you've got Richie's over the ball, or you've got so many threats in that Scotland team defensively. But it's back to what we said right at the start. It's that smart play. It's they look more intelligent as rugby players than they ever have done, and they seem to just. It's just refreshing. It's scary refreshing because, as you say, we've all been through those moments. Scotland managing in Wales to lose that game that shall not be named. We've all been there, and at no point, even when that first half was getting tight, at no point did I think we were going to lose that game this week. At no point did I think we were going to lose the England game, even when we were behind. That's a complete mentality shift.
Yeah, I think that's the other mentality shift for me, Rory, was just how ruthless Scotland were in that second half. Because we've seen that in the past for Scotland, that against other tier 2 sides. Sorry, Wales. They just, when we're ahead and we're comfortable in a game, the focus goes a little bit, and it's just like, you can see the heads are in the bar, ordering the 3-course after meal at the nice dinner with all the blazers, and that didn't happen here. I mean, the fact that George Horne's taking a quick tap at 81 minutes just for the lols. That's
well, I mean, that's tournament rugby. They were going for the top of the table on points difference if he taps and goes and they score a try. It's unreal to see a Scotland team being in a position where they're thinking about things like points difference. I mean, it's never been. I mean, I'm assuming that's what they were doing, and they might have been doing it for the laugh. Who knows? It's just it's crazy to see a team fulfilling their potential so far. There's obviously a couple of fairly big asterisks coming up in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
I think that's the difficulty, isn't it, John? Because I'm still. I think we've got over the hoodoo with France. I think the French game is going to be interesting watching them against Ireland. I think that I could see them beating this French team. I'm not saying we're going to. I just say I can see a scenario in which we beat them. I just the Ireland game is the big one for me because Ireland have. You can see where their weaknesses are, but that's now all disrespect to England, but England aren't a problem for Scotland anymore. That was a massive psychological block, particularly away from home for years. What was it, 18 years or something between, even longer.
38 years.
38 years. It was something for wins at Twickenham.
Yeah,
and that's gone now. That you can see that it just doesn't bother any of the Scotland players now. But I think Ireland particularly, and I don't know if it's a URC thing and a Pro 14 thing that there is a bit of intimidation there, particularly with Leinster.
Yeah.
That's the big hurdle. Not France for me. It's Ireland.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I think Ireland are a much better side at this point in time. Talking about the last few months than France. France had a lackluster autumn by their standards. Yes, they continue to win matches, but there was plenty of matches they should have lost. And for me, this is a brilliant period in time for French rugby in that they are struggling a wee bit. They're not on form. They've got their home World Cup coming up, and it is almost a reminder to everyone, right? You can't just turn up in September and win this. You've got a great team. You now need to work at it. You need to make sure that your playing systems, they're almost getting their lull in form out the way before the World Cup. Whereas Ireland, who I love the fact they're always world number one going into a World Cup, is magnificent. This is just what we wanted. This is, I sat here and waited for this moment. They are a very good side. They're a very good side. There is weaknesses there, and I think the bonus Scotland have this time out is it's Ireland at home. Now, we've seen in the past, Scotland are competitive at home. They're always competitive at home. And we could find ourselves almost getting that monkey off our back at Murrayfield we don't need to worry about playing them away because, let's be honest, let's not even think about the World Cup just now. This is our Six Nations now. I'm not worried about France. And I can see the Ireland game being a really good game. Like, I think they're two contrasting sides, and ultimately it'll come down to whether Ireland are able to, I don't want to say drag Scotland to their level, because that seems really disrespectful, but you know what I mean? Like, in terms of the type of rugby, dragging Scotland into a battle as opposed to letting Scotland play. If Scotland get ball and are able to play against Ireland, there's nothing to fear there. I don't necessarily think we're going to win, but there's nothing to fear.
Yeah, it's in. I was looking at the stats before for the Wales game, and it was something like bad passes and handling errors. Scotland were way worse than Wales.
Yeah,
but no knock-ons, and I think the thing for Scotland what it comes down to, and it's a point that Andy Steele's made here, is saying, you know, we've tried to do the fastest brand of rugby, we've done the defence first rugby, we've tried the kicking rugby, and now we've decided to try a bit of it all, and it's working. And there is something
funny
in
that.
But underpinning all that, Rory, is we're topping 90% tackle completion, and that's why it doesn't matter how good your passing is, how good anything at your kicking game is. If you're going to drop anywhere below 90% in international rugby, you're on the back foot, and you're probably screwed unless you're having a fun game against someone like Fiji and you just want to chuck it about a bit. But that consisting in the last two games of we've hit over 90%. That's where we need to be. Yeah,
that's exactly. And again, I think it's probably why we're less kind of worried. I'm not saying that we're convinced we're going to win it, but we're not worried about a collapse against France because we know that the team can play. I think it's and they can play a kind of game that would compete with France. Maybe France are just a little bit, they're almost playing a similar kind of counter-attacking, play it from anywhere with a defensive physicality that are maybe just, you know, a notch above Scotland potentially. But Ireland they're just executing everything at a really high level. And it's hard to know. This is the thing. I mean, we don't know what our players are going to be like until they're tested against at the moment, we've seen them against the tier 2 teams of England and Wales. And they've kind of had enough to cope with that. But it's like that bit in Any Given Sunday where Jamie Foxx is trying to convince Al Pacino that he should respect him, and he's like, but you haven't won anything yet. And that's why the Irish consistently don't give us anything in terms of respect. It's because we, you know, at the end of the day, we've had 2 good games in 1 Six Nations back to back, and that's pretty much all we've done, other than the odd game here and there. We go to France and win, then that says something else. And then if we, you know, somehow run out and close, or even get Ben Healy off the bench to kick a last-minute penalty or something again to beat them, you know. I mean, would you take losing to Italy and France if we beat Ireland? 3 wins? No.
I think for me, I think at this stage, I think we could come away if at this stage I wouldn't take it. I think it'd be a missed opportunity, but I think losing to France and Ireland within a score and beasting Italy in that last game, potentially, depending on how the results go, definitely gets you third and possibly gets you squeezed into second, depending on how the results go. Because, you know, France have lost the game now, and they didn't get a losing bonus point, which I think's important. So potentially, I think if we and this is the pessimist in me, if you pick up a losing bonus point against France and you pick up one against Ireland, there is still a chance of second for Scotland. So I think that's the challenge in the next. That's the minimum I would that for this to be a successful tournament. The minimum I would expect is losing bonus points against France and Ireland. I'd be happy with that, given where we've been, where our base level's been. I obviously want to win, but that's whether that's achievable, I don't know.
Yeah, it's tricky. The years of disappointment have kind of tempered us into realism. It's like I used to write like pseudo team talks and stuff on the blog back in the day. I could never write that now because I would just get hammered by whoever it was, Welsh or Irish fans who'd read it and go, "Oh, shut up! What you basing this on?" I'm too grounded in reality now, but it's nice that the team have given us that kind of that kind of hope has come back. We're not used to hope going into round 3, are we?
I think the thing. Do you know what I was talking? I was talking to a Wales fan over the weekend, and I said, and he said, "Look, it's hard to get that upset as a Welsh fan." And he met, and this wasn't trolling. This was a genuine point he made. He said because we've had success recently, and I think you have to take that point. It's a valid point. They've had success recently, so compared to the long and tragic history of Scottish rugby, certainly over the last 23 years, the 90s were okay. If you actually look at the results, they were generally okay. We were competitive, but from 2000 onwards, we've been pretty rubbish for the bulk of that period. So we're coming from that's our base level. So we're at the point of going, oh, look, losing bonus points are fine at this stage because of where we are. Wales are like, do you know what? Yeah, things are pretty crap for us, but we've won some Grand Slams in recent memory. We've won a few championships. We're with the players that are still playing for us. It's not that bad, or it doesn't feel that devastating because we've still got that in our memories. We haven't got that. It's almost, and so I said, well, yeah, it's a bit like Wales are our Wario to our Mario, right? We're on different trajectories. So they're coming from a place where they've had Grand Slams and recent wins, and they're on a massive downward trajectory, and they're going, plunging all the way. But they've still got the memories of things, the good times, and we're like, we remember the bad times. Things were awful, and we're surprised we're doing well. But actually, if you look at it, there's justification for that, and we have statistically got better year on year. There is a growth, there is a kind of an upward trajectory if you map it out. And I think that's it. It's until and it comes back to the Dan Bigger point, which, as fun as it was to take the mick out of, is a valid point. Until Scotland win something, and I think we have to face the fact is that as lovely as it would be for a slam or a championship this year, there will always be an asterisk against it unless we back it up with another one within 5 years of it. And I think that's probably we're not big enough to do it every year, but we should be competitive enough to do it every few years, like Wales do, for example, that Wales were doing, for example, where you're there or thereabouts most year, because otherwise it's just another 1990. It's, something for documentary makers to talk about
right
in
now,
20 years.
Wouldn't we, really?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. 100%. I'm just getting
we're so starved
ambitious.
I think, we're used to these once in a generation things. And I think, we'd happily take it.
If you listen to the Boomers, it wasn't once in a generation, though, was it, John?
No. It was all sunshine and success in Scottish rugby.
Okay. You look at it, but I mean, it's amateur rugby, but
Yeah, I think Scotland won the Grand Slam 900 times out of 100, according to the Boomers. So
I'm going to look up how often it was. It was 1984 and 1990. I know that.
Yeah. And there was one in 1936, I think.
Yeah.
I think those are the three. There's only been 3 Grand Slams, I think.
Glory days.
Bring back rucking. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're in a good place. It's strange to be, it's strange to be in this position of having won our first 2 opening games against England and Wales, and it feels strange, I think, to have beaten Wales so convincingly. And we will get on to that in the Patreon, no doubt, and the state of Welsh rugby. Is there any final words from you both on the Wales game, or you happy to go to the Patreon? Any final thoughts for our regular podcast listeners?
Just well done. It was a joy to watch.
Yeah,
utterly savoured every single moment of it. It was beautiful.
But also, we should remember we were pretty rank in the first half.
We were terrible, yeah.
We were. And this is what second game in a row where it's I think We won, but we didn't even play that well.
Yeah.
Yeah, restarts are still rubbish.
Oh, restarts, man.
Not
my
as rubbish
days.
though. Not as rubbish. There was 2 bad restarts, but generally we got the ball. I think it's that flashbacks. Honestly, it's just flashbacks. You think all the restarts were rubbish. I was watching them. There was 2 we messed up, but they were also due to really good kind of rush defense from Wales. So it wasn't every restart, and we didn't let them back in the game. So we shall see. Anyway, that's it from us for this week. We will be back next. Well, I won't be. The podcast will be back next week. I'm taking a week off, but we'll be back next week to preview the France game. Might talk about some URC games this weekend. That's happening. I'll let you talk about the URC and the Patreon, John. It's fine.
Excellent.
So
go
that'll
get
be
my
next
Edinburgh
week.
shirt on.
Week after we'll the week after we'll do the France review. We'll build up the Ireland game. We'll have all of that for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you listen on any apps. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you've got a spare 5 minutes, please leave us a review. Obviously, we've talked recently around the ban on transgender rugby players in Scottish rugby, and that has upset a certain section of the debate who have decided to accuse us of being men's rights activists and leaving us 1-star reviews. I think one of us even gave us 2 stars. I don't know if that was just a slip of the finger if they meant it, but it's 2-star reviews, awful podcast, men's activists. Anyway, if you do enjoy the podcast and you want to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that would be lovely. It'd be very helpful to us. But for the moment, and Patreons, hang on, because we're going to keep talking to you for another hour or so. For the moment, for everybody else, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from John and Rory.
Goodbye.
Hey, folks.